The book of Boba Fett? Is it? I don't know. So yeah, this is 2 episodes now. I suppose technically he actually appears in this one, so is that an improvement? Here's the thing. Because I've now been through this with the previous episode, bringing in the Mandalorian, I kind of said my piece there. And here's one other thing that I will add that I'm not sure I made totally clear there. Even if you liked that episode, because you follow the Mandalorian, and these were answers to follow-up questions that you had, and you were happy with the answers, that's great. It's still badly placed within this series as an episode coming in as episode, 5? After 4 episodes in a row of focusing on Boba Fett, to suddenly go completely with a different character out of nowhere, tying up plot threads from another show in a way that really felt like they should have been done as part of that show rather than in another one. Unless there isn't going to be a season 3 of Mandalorian, I assumed there was. That's the only way this makes any sense to me. But even if I take that into account, cramming it all into a single episode that comes in after halfway through the season with no indication this character was ever going to show up is an awkward and cumbersome way to do that. So even if you liked that episode, I will still argue that the way that they chose to integrate the Mandalorian into Boba Fett was not smoothly. It was clunky at best. Now, having said that, I really don't have a lot to say about this episode in specific because it's more of that. It's more follow-up on the Mandalorian. It is touching base with characters last seen in that. Luke Skywalker at this point in his life, Grogu, Ahsoka, I forget, Vance, was that the Marshal's name? And again, maybe if you're tied into these things, you got more out of this than I did. There isn't a lot that I can say about this specific episode that isn't a rewording of what I said about the last one, which is just redundant for me to say all that again. So here's what I'm going to say instead. On the grand scale, sort of philosophically, I feel like this is Lucasfilm telling me I'm not welcome here. And when I say that, I should clarify what I mean by me, because I don't make any presumption that I am somehow the embodiment of a standard Star Wars fan. I might be, I might not be. I kind of don't care. But I can't be completely unique in my approach to this franchise, which is I watch all the movies and then dabble in some of the other stuff on occasion if it looks interesting. So, again, I don't know how high a percentage of Star Wars fans are like me or how many of them are going through everything that is available. Maybe the actual truth is that a majority, or at least a plurality of Star Wars fans are people who have watched every episode of Clone Wars, both seasons of The Mandalorian, watched The Bad Batch, watched Rebels, and for them, this is stuff all fitting together in a way that's really satisfying. But I can't help but feel that all you do by going that route is create an increasingly insular base of fans as people who like the stuff but aren't up for doing full dives into every single aspect of it, like me, start to feel like we're not really welcome. And you know what? The previous episode didn't really make me feel like that. The previous episode frustrated me, but it didn't make me feel like I was being shooed away. 2 episodes in a row and pulling in even more threads from The Mandalorian and pulling in Cad Bane. The only reason I know that is because I looked him up, and the only reason I looked him up was because it was insanely obvious with the way that this was shot and filmed and the way his character was presented that I was supposed to know who he was and think that his presence was a big deal. I didn't because I haven't seen the Clone Wars. And again, that's not like I refuse to see it. I haven't had the time. There's only so much time in my day and only so many days in the year for me to try and do all the things I want to do. And Star Wars, much as I love it, is not my number one priority. And it's not something that I have gotten to every element or every corner of. And so when a character shows up, blatantly, clearly framed and shot and scored in a way that makes it absolutely clear, look at this awesome returning character, and I don't know who it is, it doesn't make me think, ooh, I want to find out more about him. It makes me think, you are not accommodating me. You are making a pop for people who already know who he is, and you kind of don't care about the audience who doesn't. And that may not be the actual literal truth. They probably care. But I feel like there's a core miscalculation going on here. So I'm going to make a comparison to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And because, like, there's only so many successful long-term cinematic universes you can compare it to. There aren't that many others to bring up. But I have and continue to argue that for the most part, not across the board, not 100%, but for the most part, the MCU material has been constructed in a way that many of the specific franchises and specific shows can be watched with minimal knowledge of what has gone on in other ones. Now, the amount of that does vary a little bit, but the times during which you need a lot of pre-existing knowledge to appreciate things like Infinity War and Endgame, I think they made through the marketing pretty clear this is a culmination of everything. So they kind of let you know in advance that was going to be the case. And if you weren't up for it, that would have been your cue to like, okay, well, I won't bother. So like, here's my easy go-to example right now. They are working on a Captain America 4. Sam Wilson, Falcon, is going to be Captain America. Now, while I expect it will pick up on a couple of specifics from Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the TV series, here's the thing about the way that show was constructed. It ultimately was connecting dots and putting Sam through a journey, a personal journey that I do think was one worth telling, but ultimately by the end of that, he is comfortable with the shield. And so anyone who chose to skip that show, going from the end of Endgame into Captain America 4, or whatever they end up calling it, they will see Sam having adopted the mantle of Captain America and being more or less comfortable in the role. And that's a point at which you can pick up with him from the end of Endgame. You can presume that if he had his doubts, he got over them. And if you want to watch him get over his doubts, then you can watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But if you don't want to watch that, it's a very safe assumption like, oh, he accepted the shield from Steve and now he's just Captain America. You can actually skip it in terms of the core idea that he's now Captain America. It just follows on from the previous movie directly. And while there's been an entire show in the middle, again, the degree of this might vary. We'll see what the actual plot ends up being. But on general premise, yeah, it looks like it might be skippable. Now, some people might use that as a derogatory, saying, well, if it's not essential viewing, why should I watch it? I would say you watch it because it's interesting, not because it's essential. At a certain point, while I have been someone who has been watching all the MCU stuff, as things continue to come out, it's reaching a point where if I wasn't watching them for review purposes for my job, I might start to ease off and start picking and choosing a bit more. But the problem is I'm already there with Star Wars. And while Star Wars as a franchise has been around for much, much longer, in terms of this kind of interconnectivity between its individual spin-off franchises, that's more recent, or at least in visual television and streaming media. Because you could argue this was done back with the expanded universe, back in the 90s. Maybe it was, I don't know, because I didn't read the expanding universe. I wasn't interested in the expanded universe. It felt like homework. There were a handful of things that sounded kind of interesting, but every time I even tried to wrap my head over what was going on, or I tried to get recommendations, it came with, oh, well, you need to read this book series so that you can then appreciate this really good book series. This other one isn't as good, but you need the background knowledge. And then this one's great. I'm like, okay, you're assigning me homework. I'm not doing that. And if you want to say that that makes me an undeserving fan, I guess that's a position to take. But I don't think it's particularly healthy to take an approach that is becoming increasingly hostile to people who like the property but aren't 100% devoted. And it's a difficult balance to strike, because you can swing too far in the opposite direction, where everything is almost completely self-contained, can be watched on its own with minimal actual context of the specifics of what's going on in the greater universe. But then that makes the interconnectivity feel like a gimmick that actually doesn't impact anything. So you can absolutely swing this too far the other way. I don't want people to think that I'm just saying, well, everything should just be its own thing and nothing interconnects. That's not what I'm saying, but the way that they are currently interconnecting this. And again, I'll come back to my original point, taking a show called Book of Boba Fett, and yes, I understand Boba Fett appeared in The Mandalorian, but he's also from the movies, and I was able to watch and enjoy this solely having seen his appearances in the movies for 4 episodes, and then a little over halfway through, because there's only 7 episodes, it suddenly starts integrating a ton of other stuff. If the plan was always to basically have this eventually turn into Mandalorian season 2.5, they really needed to make that clear much sooner than episode 5 out of 7. Because for someone like me, who was watching it and enjoying it, and like, oddly enough, it really seemed like the fact that I hadn't watched The Mandalorian was making me like this more than a lot of people who had. But then we hit episode 5. I was watching something that worked as a struggle for power in a crime setting, and that was the story. And I was into that story. And that story hasn't budged meaningfully for 2 episodes so that we could catch up with The Mandalorian and Grogu and Ahsoka and Luke and the Marshal, none of whom had appeared or barely even been referenced in anything prior to this. To take a show set in a location that did not require overlap with any of these characters and give it a story that was self-contained to that location, to that situation, there's no reason to bring those characters in, arguably at all, but definitely not taking over the show this far in. I don't understand. And because it feels like something that was designed to be its own thing was turned into more of a marketing exercise. And you can make that kind of argument about a lot of the MCU stuff, but I would argue they're able to marry the idea of the interconnectedness as a marketing tool and actually telling a story each time out a lot smoother than this. You'll notice, again, I've said very little about my thoughts on the individual episode itself. It seemed fine. I have no real attachment to Ahsoka. Grogu was cute. Luke was a little odd. I think that was more to do with the vocal delivery. I don't know if it was the effort Mark Hamill had to do to sound like his younger self, or whatever kind of post-record alterations they did to make him sound more like his younger self, but the delivery sounded a little off. Or maybe it was just the fact that a lot of the lines, like just feel the Force, use the Force, and how generic they are, sounded better coming out of somebody like Yoda than it does coming out of somebody like Luke. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But I didn't hate it. The Marshal, while I don't care that much about him, I did see his episode of The Mandalorian. I did get to that part, or at least the first episode he appeared in The Mandalorian Season 2. I did see that part. I like Timothy Olyphant. That's fine. But what do any of these people have to do with what's going on? What do any of them have to do with the story that this show has been telling? The only one, so far as I can tell, that is not crowbarred in very awkwardly is maybe the Marshal. At a stretch. He's at least on the same dang planet. But everybody else feels like they should be doing their own thing. Why are they doing it here? I don't know. I don't get it. I have no idea what to expect out of the finale now. I don't know. I don't know what this is anymore. And I liked what it had been. So I'm just frustrated. Book of Boba Fett, episode 6, penultimate episode. And I suppose that's the other thing. If we're building up to a conflict with the Pikes, I've got almost no investment in that because you keep cutting away from that concept to spend a ton of time on this friggin' planet that Luke is setting up the Jedi Academy. Oh, and totally petty thing. Like, I found it really weird watching advanced technology like droids being used to make a stone temple that really felt like it should have been hand-built. That was weird to me. That was a disconnected image in my brain. Like, those two things don't go together. Oh, well. What do you think about it? How much do you hate? I swear every time one of these things comes out and I don't like it, everybody hates me for it. I got so much hate for not liking Visions. I got so many annoyed comments on the last episode of this. I don't know. I'm not worked up. I'm not angry. I'm numb. I can't work up much energy to care right now. Because I feel like after 4 episodes of telling a story I did care about and then yanking away for 2 episodes, I've been trained now not to care. Because I can't be assured that you're going to keep telling the story that I became invested in. Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. You want to support what I do for some reason, I'd appreciate it. Link to the Patreon. Also, it's in the description. Plus links to other stuff that I do. Don't worry too much about it, though. Try and take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break. Thanks for sticking around into the credits. None of this would have been possible without my Patreon supporters in particular. I want to thank Robin Powell, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Bookworm. Thanks for keeping this going. And to everybody,